Okay, class, I cannot be with you today, but my voice will be. I hope you are having a wonderful day. Today you will complete the lesson independently using your headphones. Like we normally do in class, you will first complete the notes using the Nearpod slides, and write your answers on the notes that are posted on Google Classroom. So you'll be going to Google Classroom and opening the Google Doc notes for today, titled Tea Act, Boston Tea Party, and Tolerable Acts for Monday, September 26th. After you're done with your notes, you will work on creating 3 slides on your Google Slides project, slides 7, 8, and 9. You're going to be working silently today. But if you have questions, raise your hand and ask the teacher if you need help. Be respectful. Stay in your seat. Raise your hand if you need to get up, and complete all of your work. One thing I want to tell you about this video that you're watching now is that the Nearpod slides you're on now have 2 parts. The first part is the video that you are watching, where I will go through all the slides for the notes. If you go to the next slide manually on the Nearpod, it'll also go through the slides, but without my voice. So the slides are actually repeated twice, once on this video and then on the Nearpod. All right, let's get started. Go ahead and open your notes to question 1 on Google Classroom. All right, question 1 is about the Tea Act in 1773. And today's notes are all about how tensions between the British and colonists continue to rise, especially in Boston after the Boston Massacre. By the end of today's lesson, you will see that the British are doing more to the colonists than just taxing. And our first thing that they do is the Tea Act. Now, you may drink tea at home, or your parents may drink tea, and this is a law all about that tea, not sweet tea, just tea. And what this law does is it gives the East India Tea Company a monopoly on selling tea in the colonies. In other words, colonists are only allowed to buy tea from the East India Tea Company. That's what that word monopoly means. Mono means one, meaning this law gave only one company the right to sell tea in the colonies. Why did they pass this law, the Tea Act? Well, that one company, the East India Company, was failing. They were losing a lot of money. And the English government wanted to give it more business. So they said, you know what? Only you can sell tea to the colonies and you'll make all the money back. Now, the Tea Act actually lowered the price of tea in the colonies. The tea from the East India Company became much cheaper, way cheaper than tea from the other colony, from the other tea sellers. The king kind of thought that this would make the colonists happy, like now their tea, which they love to drink, is way cheaper. But actually, the colonists' reaction was very upset. They saw this as another example of being taxed or having laws made for them without a say in it, without representation. And they felt controlled. Just like when I told you to imagine how would you feel if the government said you could only shop at Walmart? You felt like your rights were taken away. The colonists felt the same. And they're going to have a pretty violent response. Okay, pause this video and take about 2 minutes to take notes on what is the Tea Act and how do the colonists, what do they think about it? Go. All right, hopefully you have taken your notes on slide 1. If you did not understand, feel free to rewind this video and go back to my explanation. Like we said, the colonists are very angry. They don't want to only have to shop from one tea company. They don't want to feel controlled. They want their rights as Englishmen, their inalienable rights. So they react. Do you remember the name of that gang I told you about of colonists that formed to protest British actions? Well, that gang is back. The Sons of Liberty, commit an act of civil disobedience to protest this law that they feel is unjust. They're angry and frustrated at the new tax on tea, and so they disguise themselves as Mohawk Native Americans and board 3 British ships. Why do they dress up as Native Americans? They don't want to be caught and don't want people to be able to see who specifically they were. They go onto the ships and they dump 342 crates of British tea into the Boston Harbor water. That's over 20,000 pounds of tea into the water. Think about how much money that was worth and how much money the East India Company lost. All across the colonies in Maryland, New York, and New Jersey, they eventually start to boycott tea. They refuse to buy it to protest the Tea Act. Okay, take about 2 minutes to write a definition for the Boston Tea Party. Make sure to include who committed this act of civil disobedience. Pause that video. You can see here's a famous painting of the Tea Party. Notice some pretty big images. You should be able to see the natives, the Sons of Liberty dressed as natives, the colonists cheering on. Obviously, these would be patriots or loyalists. Which would these be the people that are cheering? If you said patriots, you're right. So, on to question 3 of your notes. How does the king and England, how do they react? They just lost so much money worth of tea, they are furious. And they pass laws to not just tax the colonies to pay back for the French and Indian War, but to punish the colonies. These laws are called the Intolerable Acts or Coercive Acts. Those are 2 names for the same thing. The colonies called these laws the Intolerable Acts because they thought they were intolerable, they're terrible. The king and the parliament called them the Coercive Acts because coerce means to make someone do something. This law had 4 parts. 1. The Boston Harbor is closed until they pay for the dumped tea. This means no ships can come in and out of Boston. Boston loses its source of trade and food. 2. British soldiers who commit a crime in England will now in the colonies, will now have their trial in England, not the colonies. That means if they commit a crime in the 13 colonies, they don't have to be judged by a colonial judge. They get to go to England, where maybe that judge will forgive them or not give them a consequence. Think about why this would have mattered in cases like the Boston Massacre. 3. Massachusetts loses its right to self-government. They are no longer allowed to choose their own leaders. Think about the fact that Massachusetts has had its own self-government since 1620 in the Mayflower Compact. That's over 100 years of self-government. This is a big deal. Finally, 4, the Quartering Act. Colonists still had to keep soldiers in their homes. Plus, more soldiers come to Boston, Massachusetts because of these acts of civil disobedience. Okay, pause the video. Take your notes on what the Intolerable Acts are. Go. When you are done with your notes, you will scroll through the Google Slides that we just went over, but going through Nearpod, until you get to a video. Watch the video to summarize what happened. This screen with the video will look like this. To summarize what happened. When you're done with the video, you're going to make your Google Slides. You're going to make slides for slides 7, 8, and 9. Make sure to include the date, summary of the event, and picture, and how your character would feel about these events. If you're a loyalist, maybe at the Coercive Acts, your loyalist person is starting to change their mind about being so loyal to the king. You have the rest of the time to complete your notes. Get it done.